Is Monday, February 10th, 2025. This is the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. And can we verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Okay. We are now at the section of our meeting that there is an opportunity for public comment. Did we have any eager speakers?
We have none.
Okay. We are then moving into our action items, and the first action item for this evening is the approval of the minutes. Is there any questions or an approval pending? Mr. Wad?
I will move to approve the minutes from the January Facilities and Finance Committee as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Wad moved, Mr. Borowski second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Passes 5-0. Our next action item this evening is the approval of the vouchers. I believe we have several questions this evening.
Yes, there were several questions on the vouchers. I'm just going to go with the question and then the answer to that question in order. So the first question was line 175 for Okapi Publishing for $8,674. What was this for? The purchase was for phonics kits and online access to those kits. Line 256 and lines.
I'm going to just have you pause after
course.
each of them and make sure that if any questions in between there.
I do have a question, but it might not be appropriate for this committee. And it's really related to purchasing of what appeared to be curricular resources, but I'm not sure if they're like catch-up resources or if there's something that we already approved or how that works. It wasn't something that I was familiar with, so I was just curious, or if it's something that we've had for a long time, but, okay, thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Line 256 and lines 1335 through 1338 for Wings Hockey, totaling about $19,000. How and when is that tracked and reimbursed? Wings Hockey makes a deposit to the school district early in the season to cover the majority of costs. We then collect entrance fees and booster donations as well. Near the end of the season, the ice time invoices not covered by the initial deposit are communicated to Wings, who then provides another check for those costs.
I think we talk about this every year as the fees come in just because of the uniqueness with this co-op and how the funds come in and are dispersed. Is there any questions?
So there's a prepay and there's a true-up.
Reconciliation at the end, right?
Yep, okay. And then line 271 was $914,000, and it was labeled for South High School sheds. The C.G. Schmidt invoice that was referenced was primarily for the South Stadium project. It did also include approximately $21,000 related to the Hawthorne Boiler Room project as well.
I think sheds is it's a bad label. We replace sheds with actual brick and mortar buildings.
So that's actually what threw me, and I'd asked that question. So it's part of the stadium
It's part of
renovation?
the stadium project. We got rid of all the wooden ones that our tech classes had built over the years and replaced them. So this amount, though, my guess is part of a larger piece than
We
even
didn't
those built.
spend $1 million on sheds?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Lines 1509 to 1521 for CISA transactions totaled about $425,000. The question was, are those for individual seats for a full year, for second semester, and then what is the timing of those invoices? And then for this question on CISA 1 expenses, this does relate to the approved CISA contract that occurred last August. It was discussed on July 10th and approved on August 14th. And then the expenses included a membership and service fee and tuition for the second semester of the 24-25 school year. According to Student Services, CISA 1 bills in July for the first semester, again in January for the second semester, and on occasion there may be a third invoice based on attendance. Okay. Lines 1560 to 61, where was the ceiling and lighting work done? And all of that ceiling and lighting work was done at West High School.
Clarify clarification on that too. That wasn't part of ESSER because we're outside of that, so that was
It wasn't
something
part of
that was
ESSER, and it
budgeted.
wasn't part of Phase 3, which was the bleachers and the field house at South and the auditorium at West. Actually, it's been part of our standard capital improvement budget for the last several years of going in and completely redoing the lighting. So we've talked about with the elementary schools, how we've been shutting down schools and going in and doing the flooring and fire alarms and all those things, and the lighting's part of that. West was just the next one up that we fit into our schedule, and I think this one's actually spread over a couple summers because of, obviously, it's a huge building, so. We've made really good progress in that regard. I'd say half of our schools now have the exact same light fixtures we have in here.
In terms of the high schools, how are those planned out? Are the other two done or are they planned?
The other two are, well, some of those buildings have sections of their buildings that were done as part of smaller projects. But Kyle schedules it out with the other work that maybe is going in, like, let's take North High School. 2 summers ago, all that HVAC work was being done. We kind of just left that to be done on its own because of the scope of it. And so Kyle's in charge of rotating those around to fit whatever building we have access to. And the neat thing about this lighting project is a lot of it, and we reported this out in a presentation we did not too long ago, they actually do a lot of it during the school year now on second shift and on weekends. So it's what buildings do we have access, what parts of buildings do we have access to? And again, West was just the one he identified as being the next one up.
Lines 1667 to 68 were total mechanical. It's also curious where that work was done, and that work was primarily performed at South, Lowell, Hawthorne, and Prairie. Blair had a very small amount done.
What was that for?
Those were part of the HVAC improvements. Those were part of the HVAC improvements, and I don't think these were ESSER either, but it was part of that larger project of HVAC that we've done. So it'd be South's, Lowell, we did the HVAC there, Hawthorne, that was a 2-summer project, so we finished that this past summer, and then Prairie was the same. Part of that might have been a little left over as ESSER, but otherwise it's CIP budget.
I know you have kind of a running plan and priorities for how those things get done. I think it's also important to kind of highlight that there's that ongoing investment in facilities, and not everything takes a formal action necessarily. I know there's a portion of the budget that's protected for capital improvements.
Sure.
That maybe that's something that we could just get into the habit of bringing here as a regular update. Because I think sometimes there's construction or there's improvements happening at schools, and
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
we,
sure that we always know why or where that's being funded or how that's being supported. And I think it's a positive story. Just would be really helpful to have some background to it.
yeah, and we used to do that more, and I think, as I look back, as you asked the question, ESSER and Phase 3 just kind of overwhelmed so many of those conversations. But Kyle does do a list of projects we're gonna do the upcoming summer that we can report back out. Or in fall, we do the, kind of the look back to the report they gave.
I think we can add it in the same way that we did with all of the ESSER spending, because when we first talked about what we were going to be using out of our general funds and project works, we did review that.
Okay,
So it's a good idea just to then, to Dr. Piasek's point, we can just revisit that same way that we did with the big projects.
I do think it's helpful when we see like 6-figure plus sums coming through the voucher reports, that maybe that's a good way to just kind of elevate those.
sure,
They definitely stick out a bit on the list.
yeah.
Thanks.
That was the last question that was sent in.
Great. Dr. Siebert?
So back to the phonics kits, I've been working with Ms. Gunnerman a little bit. She'll give us an update for sure on Friday, but she believes it might be purchasing for the private schools with their allotment of title money.
Okay.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Is there any other questions or discussion items on the vouchers? If not, I would be looking for a motion.
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Passes 5-0. All right, now we are moving into our discussion or information items for this evening, and the first topic is 3121 FICA Alternative Plan.
Push the button to talk. We'll turn the remote. Yeah, I put this in the Friday update 2 Fridays ago to kind of give you some preliminary information related to this program, because I don't think most people know what this is, which is part of the topic we'll be talking about. But we've been talking, both Human Resources and the Business Office have been talking for the last many years, actually, about whether this is something we should continue with offering our part-time employees. So we finally came to the point where let's bring it forward at least for a discussion. So first educate the board on what this is, but then some of the hurdles that we think it provides. There is some cost savings in terms of being able to calculate that, but then there's the admin cost and burden that comes along with it. So I asked Connie to come in as payroll supervisor. She's obviously the most knowledgeable about this program and how the day-to-day impact of it is, to just kind of come through and then voice some concerns. I put a handout on your desk that kind of outlines some of the rules and regulations that Connie will touch on also, and then we're here to answer any questions you might have about the program or maybe what we're envisioning as possible next steps.
Okay, so again, everybody has this, so I will start reading through and stop me
I
at any
actually-
time with.
I do want to pause because what I
Yes.
do think we need to do is just start at the top with who it applies to, what is this program overall, before we
Yes.
start digging into that, because this only applies to a subset of our employees.
That is correct, yes. So this would be non-pensionable employees. So as you, like WRS has the requirement that an employee of the district must have 12 months and 880 hours would be the expected employment. For all of those other employee groups, or anybody who wouldn't fall into that category, they would not be WRS eligible, so then they could go into this program. Now, we do, it would be for, really, like, we have some aides and some seasonal substitute teachers that would be eligible because they're not going to make that. So they then would go into this 3121 plan. It's a 457 plan, a type of retirement plan. And these employees, it would be 7.5% of their gross earnings. They do not pay FICA. So that means the district also does not match that for the employee. So that's also one of the topics that we'll discuss here. So with new hires, once the plan is explained to employees that they're not earning the Social Security quarters and credit, some do decline hires. So this is becoming a retention issue at times, not for all groups, because we do have some, it's a more transitory group if they're not a full-time teacher. The aide group, really, there are select few that have enough qualified hours that they would be in the pension plan, others not so much. So then they would fall into this plan. The same with the substitute teachers. And on that note, with the sub-teachers, if they have to go into this plan, a lot of them may choose another district to go into that would have them earning their FICA quarters, hours and earnings. Most employees who are on the alternative FICA plan generally do not remain employed with SDW for an extended period of time, and that would be part of the reason why, of course, wouldn't say all, because it is more of a transitory group, but they would rather go to an employer that offers that they can partake in the FICA Social Security and have the employer match that for them, and we don't do that. During the hiring process, employees must acknowledge awareness of the account, but may not fully understand or forget this agreement, which leads to forfeited funds. So again, if they don't understand it, they have to sign, it's called a windfall agreement, and that's the IRS declared agreement, that they understand the district is not contributing on their behalf to their FICA Social Security account, neither are they, so they don't earn that. No Social Security credit, they do not earn this through the program, and again, it's very confusing, especially they look at this form, this windfall, it's called a windfall credit, and they're like, well, what is the windfall? Well, the windfall, it's explained to them by the IRS that you get to keep these funds that you earned. They're guaranteed. So that was kind of how it was sold to them. I mean, it was a good program. It saved the district money. It does save us a fair amount. However, again, employees do have a problem with not getting that credit for them.
I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but this, because I was here when this first started being talked about, when George W. Bush, remember he wanted to privatize Social Security? Well, this started being talked about at the exact same time. I don't know if they were ever linked or not, but it was seen as a budget savings at the time, and I can't help but think that kind of became a popular idea or thought, but as she's mentioned, just to give you the history of the timing of it, and I think around probably 2005 or so, we've started this program, somewhere in that range, if I had to guess.
Just a quick clarifying question. So this isn't an option. The employee doesn't get to choose between getting their normal FICA or opting into this. This is what these employees that fall into this category will get as a result, basically as a substitute.
It's required.
Okay.
So we have,
With one exception, rehired annuitants.
that's a whole nother,
So it's never always, is my only, there's one group that they get to choose.
right.
But for a person brand new
Yep.
to SDW that is not a pensionable employee, this is mandatory.
Well, outside of, we had to exclude, like, the event workers and coaches, because they were not working for us. Like, the example, we're at a game, a football game, and the AD was asking, they needed help, assistance on the line, a chain person or something, and they would ask a parent, can you please do this? Oh, but we have these forms for you, you have to sign off on this.
Yes, we
No,
opted them
don't.
out because to sit there and explain it was,
And then they don't.
everyone else in this category is required, to answer your question.
Right.
Is required to do this.
Thank you.
Right. So, and then, well, we'll get the rehired annuitants in a bit. So there's a dormant account rule. After leaving the district, employees must leave their account inactive for 1 year before they can access the funds. And again, these are all IRS rules. They're not dictated by Mid-America with US Bancorp. They're not dictated by the School District of Waukesha. These are all IRS rules. Participants with smaller balances who have termed employment, they forget to transfer the plan, it could be eaten up with administrative fees. So the inactive account fee is $1 per monthly admin fee during periods of inactivity. And some, like you have people with a smaller balance, their balance is going to be wiped out pretty quickly with that. So they're only earning, I think, 1.8% right now, interest on this. And the district is not charged for the plan, but they invest the funds, and they give the employees, the participants, 1.8% earnings on that. So then that is how US Bancorp and Mid-America is making their money on that. Waiting period for transfers, active district staff. If an employee continues full-time status, they are eligible to withdraw the funds 2 years from the date of the last contribution, as long as the account balance does not exceed $7,500. If the balance is $7,500 or more, the employment must be terminated to receive the funds. So again, there is a 1-year period. We have had 2 occasions where a past employee would call and say, this is a hardship, could you please sign a letter for me so I can withdraw my funds, when it was over that amount. And we can do that, but again, there are several forms we have to complete because, again, of IRS regulations. W-2 confusion on box 12, in box 12, there's number a G, and the funds that are deducted from the employee paychecks will show in that, and the employee just doesn't understand. They're like, well, this is kind of retirement, right? Yes, and it is a retirement fund, but they just do not understand what it is, because they don't all necessarily question the checks, and then they get the W-2, they see their accountant, and they say, what is this? We don't know. And also, a lot of accountants are not familiar with this plan either, and they are further thrown off, too, when they're trying to file the taxes, and your FICA taxable, Medicare taxable, they don't equal. And so then I get calls after the W-2s are out, they're like, well, you did this wrong, this is not correct, and we have to explain the program then at that time of why, because they don't have the FICA deducted. So communications, we have found that Mid-America is very inconsistent in setting out their statements. They were merged with US Bancorp last year, and US Bancorp has improved the communications, but it's not been what we would consider very good. It's at the end of the year. I do send, with every payroll, I send a report, it's called a census report with everybody who's contributed. It has the updated addresses and contact information for Mid-America and US Bancorp. But this does make it a little difficult on our part if Mid-America say they're supposed to be updating on their side with our reports, but they weren't always real good at doing that, so the employees may not necessarily have received an updated statement. And that comes out at the end of the year, so in January, they would receive that. And once an employee terms, the district cannot provide an updated address or email, phone number to US Bancorp, Mid-America, because we don't have it. So that's up to them to communicate with the termed employee.
And we think there's a lot of, especially you're a young summer worker, you forget this account even exists, and we have no way if someone would even call, or like Mid-America, there's no way we have the address. A young person's probably gonna have 5 addresses before that call's even made or were reached out to. So this is probably the biggest hurdle, not to mention Mid-America's, and we do think it's gotten better. Mid-America's internal processing was not always the best.
And a couple of things that aren't mentioned on here, there's a beneficiary form, and that the employee is responsible to submit that on their own behalf for obvious reasons. We can't follow up to see if they submitted a beneficiary form. So say they do have more of a substantial balance, I'll say over $5,000, and something happens to them, and they didn't submit that beneficiary form, that could be a problem. Whereas like WRS, when they send out their information to all employees, it's noted, this is your beneficiary. Right. And that just doesn't happen here. So I think that's a cause for concern as well. As Darren had brought up, the rehired annuitants, they're in a whole special realm on their own. So when they come back, return to the district, so a rehired annuitant is somebody who has retired within the WRS pension system. And once they return to the district, they're collecting their pension, they're within a certain amount of hours. Well, then they're under those pensionable hours, but the IRS has deemed that they may opt out of this plan, which means they will opt out, if they choose to, they can partake in this retirement fund, but they will not have FICA Social Security deducted, nor will we contribute on their behalf. So that is another form that we have to maintain on behalf of the employee, the rehired annuitant, that they have opted in or they have opted out, and process the payroll accordingly for them.
And again, the rehired annuitants is a retiree who started drawing their pension, but then works under the 880-hour threshold
Yes.
to become eligible, but then they're treated as a separate class within this larger program.
So that's all I have. Any questions?
I think, so this was listed as a discussion item.
Thought it's so new and different that we didn't want to come in with a plan. We really just wanted to get the Q&A
Yeah.
out on the plan, the benefit itself.
So and I guess that's where that leads it, it's kind of, this doesn't sound like it's in any means a benefit to our employees. What is intended to give some hope for retirement savings and to boost that actually would appear that it doesn't, especially when you talk about Social Security. And the population of employees that we have is relatively small that within this group, as well as the amount that they would actually be vesting towards this goal is going to be relatively, I will say, stereotyping, insignificant. So what is another option? So if it's not this, then what?
They would be.
We would return them back to Social
FICA
Security.
Social Security.
And how would we go about that?
You just pick we're
date.
picturing July 1st, on the beginning of our fiscal year, you go into their benefit payroll records and you switch them to the same deduction that all the rest of them, deduction and benefit, I should say, that everyone else has, and we just proceed with that.
Are we saying this is like a light switch that we
Yes.
have the
Yes.
decision to make?
Yes, and we did talk with Mid-America on if there were did we need to follow any protocol with them? They said, well, really, you would just notify us that you were stopping the program, and they would maintain it for the participants who are in there. But there would be nothing else that we would need to do with the IRS. They said it would just be a done deal. They maintain those records.
Okay.
I did do a survey, not that we have to follow what other districts do, but the only district in the area that I could find that offers this is West Allis. And when I finally tracked down the person who administered it, I said, yeah, we're looking at whether we should continue this. And her response was, oh my God, would we love to get rid of this? Because tracking all of this for a group of people that most of them are gone, it's a lot of work. So again, it saves money in Excel, but when you look at the true cost of it, I can't say it doesn't save anything. It's hard to calculate that, I guess, but there's a lot of work that goes into this, and we don't feel it's a solid benefit for the vast majority. I'm not here to say there's not some employee out there who fits the perfect criteria where this is really a benefit to them, because there is going to be some. But for the larger percentage of them, I think a lot of money gets forgotten, a lot of fees get taken. And it's just confusing to a significant number of people as well.
And the onerous of explanation falls on HR. So they do have a hard time explaining it to the employee and going through the various forms and why they have to partake in it.
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Have you done an analysis of what the difference in cost would be? I mean, obviously, there's an employer component, but what the employees are putting in would be less. So they would keep more, and then they would just take that, it would just move forward with them as part of their Social Security earnings.
Yep.
So I think perhaps if we were to come back to try to take some action on it, having the actual numbers would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm just looking at this number here in terms of the total cash balance on the individual accounts. And that's cumulative since the plan was started, if I understand that.
Yeah,
correctly.
That is correct.
we downloaded a report of everyone who's in it and what their cash balance is.
That was the December 31st
Yeah,
balance.
it's somewhat dated now, but not a lot has gone in since then. Right? And their interest rate's steady, so it's not like there's been some of that's interest earning certainly over time.
Does the IRS recognize any kind of a transfer strategy if someone wants to take these accounts and move it over? Is there anything that employees
Well,
can do?
when they term, they can, but they have to do the waiting period. So it's either being terminated for 1 year or inactive for 2 years, and they can roll it into another IRA, retirement fund. If they withdraw, there's also it's a mandatory 20% tax if the balance is over, I think it's $200.
I'm assuming there's some limits on what kinds of accounts they can put it in, or can
Yeah,
it go straight to
yes, like they
Roth?
couldn't put it into a Roth.
They can't, okay.
No.
We have that from Mid-America. I can't remember what the specific answer is, but we can bring that back.
The Roth was my specific question, because
They cannot roll it into a Roth because it's not post-tax, pre-tax.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Webb?
Yeah, so just be clear, the employee, while they're in the plan, has no control over how those funds are invested? It's not like it's,
Correct.
okay. And
It's
it's
just-
there's just a flat rate that gets paid out in terms of interest on it?
1.8%.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
Okay.
That's when the plan was designed, that was the choice, because my guess would be the district wanted it to be there for retirement, right? Wasn't supposed to be this risky or perceived risky investment.
I would think that pending moving forward with any type of decision on this, to come back with data. As a CPA and somebody who watches this, my heart sinks a little bit to see the volume of people who are no longer here that have balances. Because effectively, that's lost money on the table if it was actually invested into any other type of securities, bonds, stocks that would be far more helpful to them.
Yes.
That sending a letter to remind them with the guidance to move it would be a really good customer service feature for them, and just to give them that. And to your point, if they don't know or forget that it's there pending on some of these balances, I think that that would be a great
Yes.
ask for us to help them help themselves.
Yes, and the issue again is the terminated employees who are no longer with the district, we cannot follow up with them. We see who they are, but there are so many that to try to get the addresses, like the W-2s were sent out, and we have so many employees that term mid-year, and then they're calling and saying, well, I didn't get my W-2, I forgot to tell you I moved. So, it's hard enough for us with our employees that just termed in the last 6 months, much less people that were termed 1, 2, 3, 5 years ago.
We did have some conversations with Mid-America about them sending out a correspondence and that we would have some editing rights within that letter. And what we had talked, Connie and I had talked about, or maybe it was Kristen and I, about just setting up a Mid-America page on our benefits website that gives the contact information and the forms they would likely need, and just kind of have it there as a library, but clearly say, your account's with Mid-America now. We can't look it up. We can download that spreadsheet. That's about the only
That's it.
access we have to anything. That's just a total list. It's not any detail. We can't look at even addresses or anything on there. I think it's strictly financial, if I remember right.
Well, I provide addresses, I can pull
We don't know
a
what's
list, but we don't know what's
Mid-America's
accurate for,
database.
no.
We have no idea.
No.
But we can bring back those.
I think based on the comments and what we're hearing, that that would be the route that we would like to go. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Connie?
Good luck.
Welcome. Thank you.
Congrats.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be Thursday. She's supposed to be last night, it's supposed to be today. So thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry.
One more day of sleep.
All right, moving then into our next discussion item, it is the 2025-2026 student fees.
Going back a few months, normally the student fees, we approve them now, either, March, April is the latest. Just so registration and all that work that goes into starting up next school year is already underway, and so that way the schools know what the fees are. And, but then there was some conversations when we talked about the drainage project out at North High School, and the auxiliary lot, and, people in that school area, having that option to park for free, about relooking at the parking fee. So I just did some math, and I purposely brought it back as a discussion because, depending on how much you want to collect, we can put this fee just about anywhere. I did include a fee survey for Waukesha County, if you want to go down and look at that. And $200 seems to be roughly the annual fee for a parking pass. But I thought you'd find that interesting. So I did the math, and the key to this calculation is you'd have to decide how many of those kids at North who haven't been paying are going to now pay, because there's still options around North where you don't have to pay. So so I said half the kids will pay. I could be way off on that, but I had to bring you something. And I said, all right, if we're not looking to generate additional revenue district-wide on this, what would the fee have to be? So that was kind of the rationale that I brought forth. And then the fee schedule that's attached, it was around $185 to break even. I don't know where we're thinking we're ending up. I do recall in my previous history in the district, there was a time in the school district where the parking fee was designed to be a deterrent of having kids come to our schools. Our high schools were full. Parking was a premium. So that was part of, and the board at the time, we have a lot of yellow buses driving around. You don't have to, in most cases, drive whether you agree with that or not, don't have to drive. So that's kind of the history of the fees. So now I think it's fair to come back and have this conversation, because we do have a unique situation at North that we don't have at any other school. So I just throw out a couple calculations to help frame the conversation, and then I thought we'd talk about it, and then whatever we come up with, or maybe it's a further conversation next month as we lead into approval, so.
Dr. Piasek?
Thank you. Darren, the survey that you attached. I did a little bit of my own homework, so I agree. But do you know, or can you project what the total parking revenue is?
Yeah, in the executive summary, for the last 2 fiscal years, we've collected $107,000 on, and actually, both numbers were very close to that, within 2,000 either way.
I see, that's over where you put the 85. And is there a specific line item for where those dollars go? I mean, I know we're maintaining the parking lots and things, but we would probably need to do that anyway, right?
Yeah, we have a requirement, I think, to have
Yeah.
good parking lots. It's an expectation, I would think.
Yeah.
We don't, in my mind, there's no like direct correlation. It goes to fund the maintenance budget of the district.
Yeah.
So it gets rolled into the CIP, and from there, we fund, the primary use of these funds is the seal coating or replacement or whatever. But we also have supervision costs. You have the permits, you have all these, the kind of the administrative framework you're funding, and not that it's huge money. But that's the purpose, but it's all parking lot related, in the end. Now, some years, like coming out of COVID, we were told by our consultants, don't do a lot of asphalt because the quality of the product was iffy. So those dollars, in my mind, built up in Fund 41, and now we're gonna start seeing asphalt projects moving forward again. So, but that's a common question for any fee that we get is, where exactly does it go?
You haven't seen that number changing, though? Do you think it's consistently about the same? Because I see 23, 24, obviously, prior to that, it was a little different, because
Correct.
Didn't have
I didn't go
money
back
here,
further than that, but our fee budget doesn't
it seems about the same.
normally move a whole lot. The only adjustment we make is we have fewer and fewer kids. So we do adjust for that. We haven't changed the amounts or, so I would think that number over a pretty extended period of time has been pretty consistent.
We don't charge our teachers to park, do we?
No.
I didn't think so. I knew the answer to that question, but I do think it's important that we keep track of the cars. And I think it's important that the kids have spaces and that the SROs and the admin kind of knows who's supposed to be where. I think that's important. And just looking at what other districts are at, I don't think you could say that any one particular school is unreasonable or is kind of an outlier. But just because it's the going rate, I'm not sure it's the right amount. I don't know.
Right.
When I look at all the other fees that we charge, I think this one is just disproportionate to park your car versus something that you actually get something for other than a parking space, which we have lots of. So I struggle with that because I think, at least I know a lot of teenagers that are paying for their parking space themselves. It's a big line item, but I would really like to see us do something there. And not just because of what's happening at North, but my understanding, just that the vastness of the west and south lots too, are that you can pay a lot of money and you're still parking
A ways
on the
away.
other side of the block, you know?
No, I agree. I think it's just timely. And the boards looked at our student fees, over the years, back in 18, 19 or somewhere in that range. We got on course fees because they were all over the place. A course fee at West was different for the exact same class than it was at East or South or wherever. So we have done a lot of work. We just kind of left it for the last few, well, COVID hit. We didn't change a whole lot of anything because no one was paying fees. So I just think it's timely to look at it. There really like I said, there really hasn't been fee changes. I can't remember the last time, like in a registration fee that we've even had. Over a decade, probably.
We are one of the few districts that doesn't charge per sport for athletics fees, I think, right?
I thought we
Kind
were
of a mix.
more unique, but it's kind of a mixed bag. I think if, there's a survey of the whole metro area, but I didn't think you wanted to see all that data, because they really expanded out. But I think we're in the minority in offering one fee for as many sports. That's why you look at those averages for the high school. I think it's a little misleading. I think we're actually better than most of our neighbors, because I think a lot of them do charge per sport. But the scenario they ran is one sport, one parking fee, one registration. So I think we do fairly well. I wish, and it'd be an ungodly long report if you did it. When you factor in that we are not charging any secondary class course fees versus what our neighbors more than likely are charging, and have charged in the past, I think we do some really good work in that regard. Elmbrook, I think, has no course fees. The only reason I say that, and this is not because I'm bitter, they did a year after us and they got a big story in the Freeman. I missed our story. So,
One of the things I noticed that I hadn't really paid attention to before that you had captured in this survey was the instrument rentals. And that's something that I know, just being among a number of middle school parents, that we work through a private company to rent those instruments, and it's pretty expensive. So it looks like a lot of those districts actually have maybe purchased their own instruments and are renting them out to students at a significant fraction of what some of our students are paying. So that's not showing up in our fees, but I know some families that are paying $400 or $500 a year to rent a band instrument, and that's pretty significant. I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, but it looks like some other districts are taking a different approach.
yeah, I can call around and see what some of our neighbors are doing. A lot of it, I don't know if a lot of it, some of it's just socioeconomic as well. Families' ability to rent their own, and maybe they don't go through us, or, but yeah,
I don't believe that we offer the option to in many cases.
but I can bring back more information on the music part.
Mr. Wad?
Yeah, so if I recall correctly, if a student parks in a lot without a permit and they are identified, they are issued some sort of a parking ticket, is that correct?
That is correct, right, Tanya?
Do we happen to know how much we're collecting in parking ticket revenue at each of the schools?
That I don't know.
Is that something that we can get?
What's your guess?
I don't know. Well, I think, so here's why I asked this. I think students, at least this was my understanding from my daughter, when she started driving and parking, was that an awful lot of effort is put in by the students to avoid getting parking tickets, to the point where they're tracking the days that they're actually patrolling and what times. And my daughter insisted that she had worked out exactly what days she could park in the lot and what days she had to stick to the auxiliary, and whether that was mornings or when she was coming back from being off campus over lunch. I'm just wondering if there's a significant difference from high school to high school in terms of the collection. I mean, And I would lean more into, I don't want our staff involved in the parking enforcement business, right? Like, I get the need to know who's authorized to park on campus and so forth, but there is a certain amount of, like, what are we gaining here? And how much is lost just in, whether it's our SROs or other staff at the buildings being involved in parking enforcement.
Yeah, we'll try to gather that and talk to the high schools about how they go about doing it.
Yeah, that would be the other thing I'd like to know is like, who's involved and what kind of effort is actually put in on that? Because that's something I think we need to weigh into the total dollar figure and what we're really gaining from the fees.
I'd actually just like to layer on, and I think Darren, you and I have talked about this, there's also the theory that it's cheaper to pay a parking ticket than it is for the full semester pass or full year. So the math that these children are doing to figure out that.
Yep, I forgot about that piece of it.
It's
but yes.
cheaper for them to just get a ticket or risk the ticket than it is to pay the fee, just says another piece. But staying on the parking fee piece, we have not talked yet that our high schools all have different rates and whether or not we need to combine and make these, right? I think they have different, are they all the same now?
Parking, yes. And even all the fees are. When we started diving into fees, the course fees were
Okay.
hit and miss across the district for the same class, and we quickly, within a year, we got rid of all that, so.
And then I would just close just with the one final piece is, we have to have some type of fee. Student safety is ultimately important, and they are terrible drivers in these parking lots on their own, according to everyone who tries to stay away from entrance or exit of school hours when the teens are going to be exiting. So I think that the balance on how we navigate that needs to be a fee. There needs to be assigned spots and how we manage that.
I just want to add that when all the high school students find out that the jig is up, they can blame Mrs. Kozlowski and Mr. Wad for exposing the system.
I think students gaming parking's a time-honored tradition.
I
'cause
do.
Even a gray-haired
I do
guy
too.
like me
I think we have to
remembers.
do something so that they can still try to beat the system, because that's part of.
I think we should be waiting for thank you notes on this life skill that they're developing.
It is quite a bit of work for the school administrators, though. There's a hefty form, it's semester by semester, there's a lot of paperwork and stuff that the kids are turning in. Again, I think it's important to know that, whose vehicle is whose, and to Mrs. Kozlowski's point, things happen in the parking lot, sometimes accidentally, and it's good to know who's who and that they have a place. I think having that spot is important. I think the big difference, though, is just the structure and the layout of the different lots and how much street or auxiliary parking is otherwise available. So,
Mr. Zenobia?
Yes, thank you. A question on, has the daily fee ever been lower? Would that
I've
be
never-
any incentive for them actually paying?
I don't think we've
the
ever
daily
talked
fee
about
and-
the daily,
As opposed
or,
to,
you're talking about the structure,
yeah, just,
how we do it.
is the daily fee paid? How is it collected? And does it make any sense to,
The daily fee would be paid by the student coming in and saying, let's say they got their license on May 28th. There's a handful of days of school left, they might come in and say, hey, I'll just pay this, because it's, they do the math, it's cheaper than buying.
So it's not the honor system, is that what we're saying?
yeah, I don't think anybody's paying the daily fee.
Okay, fair enough.
There's no tolls. We're not-
maybe this should be an elective course that our students could take, how to do this.
Yeah.
I don't see any
Tolls might be
reason.
it.
I don't see any reason to mess with the fee overall if it's not gonna change a great deal, in my opinion.
But we can bring back this information and finalize a number? Or no number? I agree. One of the things we've talked about, or I talk about on a regular basis, what's the net of the fees? What's the net gain? Because it creates a lot, especially those course fees. I mean, it was just, in my mind, there was no way we were making out with the amount of time it took to track all that, collect it, book it, try to collect it from people who weren't paying them. So it's good we're having this conversation. We can bring back all these things and hopefully, again, we don't have to make a decision until April, so we have some time to think about it.
Okay. Our next discussion item for this evening is the monthly budget report.
So just at a high level, I'll review the tax levy, the budget chart, and the health and dental claims. For the tax levy, as Heather noted last month, the tax levy amounts now appear on the tax levy document. In January, we received our first payments from all the local municipalities. You will now see the amount we have received to date, as well as the balances due. Any questions on the tax levy? As for the budget chart, as you can see, our fiscal year-to-date amounts are lower than in fiscal year 23-24, and this is primarily due to the one-time costs related to ESSER. And then finally, for health and dental, the claim track numbers are again included for your review and are similar to past months. That's all I have.
Can I ask my favorite question? On the health and dental, the claims, our fund balance, how are we doing on that? Last we talked, we had several large claims that we were eating into.
Yeah, we seem to be doing all right. The stop loss eventually jumps in and takes care of those costs. And then we pay them back over years with higher premiums. But we're doing fairly well. I don't know if we're going to hit the number that we had set aside for the use. We're also talking about our reserves in terms of the renewal coming up for 25-26. But I think we're doing better. I mean, if we could take one claim off of our books, we would really be having a great year. That's how insurance works, I guess. So I think we're in a good spot.
Okay. I don't want to say that's an improvement from last year, but nonetheless.
Yeah, no, we reviewed it
wrong
and
way to look at it,
actually,
But yeah,
Heather's involved with our calls with insurance consultants now because she's doing the accounting side of it. And Krista Morose, who we've had here, we've been spending a lot of time on mainly part of the renewal conversation for this upcoming school year about how reserves fits into that. So it's certainly a hot topic.
okay. Dr. Piasek?
Last month, I think, or the month before, we talked about the specialty pharmacy stuff that was going to migrate to a different strategy. And it's, from what I can tell, there are a lot of industry and companies that are doing the same thing, where you have kind of a broker for specialty that's helping assist that. What I'm seeing in a lot of others, I don't know if it's specific to nonprofit or not, but that the employees / the patients themselves are being run through quite a bit of administrative hoops to try to make those specialty pharmacy gift cards, debit cards, and things work for them, because we as the employer don't necessarily have control over the program. So have we checked in with any of the folks that are dealing with the high-end specialty pharmacy to see if they're getting what they need? Because most likely they were getting what they needed last year, and then we changed the system on them, and there's some red tape. So I'm just curious if we have, or if we could check in to make sure that that's.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, but I'll check in with Kristen. She would be the person. And normally if there was something, more urgent, or she would have mentioned something, so off the top of my head, I would say everything seems to be fine, but I will ask her that question.
Thank you.
I see no other questions. We'd be looking at for recommendations for future committee meetings. Dr. Piazza?
I kind of already said it, but I'd love an update on how the specialty pharmacy is going at some point. Maybe after we give it a few months.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one for some other things we're doing. I think it'd be a good report. Just quick food for thought. We were supposed to have the audit presentation tonight. That got pushed back. We have the land transfers deals for the north stormwater project, the easements and all that were part of that. That'll likely be coming next month. Our normal March stuff. So next month's agenda might be a tad bit longer, just so you're aware, but.
Okay. We do have a need to adjourn to executive session. Be looking for someone to motion us in. Mr. Zenobia?
I would motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Second it.
Okay, it's been motioned by Mr. Zenobia and second by Mr. Borowski. Tanya, do you want to take the roll call? Aye.
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 Okay, we are officially in closed